Hello, this is Amelia Lyons. I'm looking today at types of supervision that people consider at the start of their careers or sometimes later on in their careers. Perhaps they haven't had the opportunity to have supervision from the start of their career. So in this video, I want us to think about the different kinds of supervision that there are, and when best to harness those to your best advantage within your career. So we can see that there are a number of kinds of supervision, which we might classify into self-facilitated one-to-one, facilitative group, peer supervision group, and one-to-one peer supervision, not necessarily in that order. But we can talk about the merits of that as well. So examples of self-supervision might include, it's not just thinking to yourself, well, what do I do about this, and reflecting. Of course, that process naturally happens, and that's positive. But what do we do with those internal reflections that go on all the time? It's quite good normally to perhaps keep a short diary or a journal, or just some spontaneous free writing when you're feeling full up with work and what's going on and not quite sure what to do about something, is just to get it down on paper. And often even the process of writing it down on paper, just scribbling it down, can bring things to mind and can help to clarify thoughts. So that's quite often the first thing. If something's disturbing me at work, something's on my mind, perhaps I'm not sleeping very well as a result of that, is just to get it down. And that will free myself up in many ways. Facilitated one-to-one supervision. So by that usually means with someone more experienced or more expert in my field than myself. So there I'm looking for somebody, who has a more in-depth professional background than I do, and can offer me something that I feel that I won't have myself. Now, as I get older, that can be sometimes a little bit more difficult, because you develop inevitably experience over the years, but there's always someone I've found who I find is more expert than me in a particular specialist field, or has a fresher view than I do, or nowadays sometimes a newer view, which can actually be more beneficial to me as well. So I'll usually be able to identify that person, and I have a regular supervisor who I work with, who's another group analyst, who's younger than me but has a better specialist knowledge now than I do. And sometimes I'll pick one-to-one supervisors on an occasional basis who may be able to help me with a specific problem. So that may be within my profession, or aligned to it, or somebody quite different. And because I'm now at towards the end of my career, I know quite a lot of people, so therefore I know who I can pick up the phone to. Again, at the early part of one's career, one might not feel confident enough to do that, but people are often, you can approach them on a sort of an occasional basis and will usually be quite forthcoming. It really depends at the time. Merits of a facilitated group. Now that's then brings us diversity, it brings a range and variety of perspective. So sometimes people think, oh, well, I won't get enough time or attention when I'm in a group, I need the one-to-one. But actually what a lot of people don't realize is that when one person's working in the group, everyone's working. So you may be presented with problems that are different to yours that the group spend time working on, but that problem may be likely to arise for you next week or next month or next year. But the principles often that come out of these issues also can be more generally applied. So groups are really helpful for a variety of perspectives on a problem, and also to provide more in-depth support. And often you'll get a range of professions in a group, so you'll have a range of depth and weight to arguments, so you'll be the stronger for it. Your reflections will be the stronger for that experience. Now, peer supervision groups, I tend to find work best when you're sort of in your mid-career and later career. Though I do recall being in a peer supervision group fairly early on in my career, and that was an absolutely brilliant group to be a part of. I was just invited by a friend of mine, and that group consisted of a nun, 2 priests, a couple of teachers, people that you wouldn't think necessarily I had much in common with, but actually that was a very compassionate group and a very trusting group, and I got a lot from that group. Peer one-to-one supervision, and that again towards the latter end of one's career probably is a bit more frequent, because you've now know colleagues who are experienced professionals and you know who to go to about what specific issues. I'm more skeptical about peer one-to-one supervision early on in one's career, because often your peers are not necessarily any more experienced than yourself, and how far will they be able to take you? So you get a lot of support with that, but will you actually get an additional, an accelerated learning from that? So there's a danger, I think, of the one-to-one there, peer supervision being a bit collusive or even overly confrontational, rather than it being a balanced process that pushes you on professionally, challenges you, helps you to move forward, helps you to see the perspective from the other side, that sort of thing. So those are some kinds of supervision. And then some of the questions that we get is, should my supervisor be from the same profession or different? At the start of one's career, the same profession can be quite helpful, because you're just learning to establish yourself in your profession. You're learning what is it like to be a professional in this profession. And I think it can be quite helpful to have a sort of an elder sibling, as it were, in that profession who you can turn to and think about things with. But as you develop as a professional and you develop your own unique way of working, then at that stage, I think the difference in professions, certainly I work in a health board, becomes less. And we're often working in multidisciplinary teams, OTs, nurses, counsellors, psychologists, and so on. And actually working with another professional can really be helpful, as you move into the middle stage of your career. Again, in terms of questions about supervision groups solely I would counsel against that almost from the start, if possible, because that will tend to promote a kind of narrow group think, and it's hard to sort of get out of the goldfish bowl there, and it's hard to get out of the goldfish bowl anyway. So I would certainly say, if you can be in a diverse group fairly early on at the start of your career, and going forward, I think that is the most beneficial for people. Certainly cross-divisional. So even if you're with people from the same profession, crossing divisions, like, for example, mental health, general health, older people, child and adolescent, those kinds of things. If you can get a mix of people in from those areas, I think that will help to broaden the perspective, and also to have a more holistic view of the patient, as it were. Is if we have a number of different people coming at it from different angles, we'll get a more holistic view of the patient. Should my group be made up of deliberately different people, like, for example, the opposite gender, black, white, brown, all that sort of thing? Older, younger, so there's lots of different dynamics there. Ideally, I would say that it would be good to have as a wider range of people as possible, but sometimes that's not always possible. So I think yes, if possible, but not go to any lengths there, because we're not going to find the perfect mix of people there. Should my supervisor be from outside or inside the organization? That's a good question. And again, the start of one's career, it may be more useful to have them inside the organization. That helps you to accelerate your learning about how things are done around here. On the other hand, and as your career develops, again, there's more of an argument to work with somebody, at least for some of the time, outside of the organization, because again, they're not buying into the groupthink that's in the organization. They'll help you to think about different perspectives about how to do things differently. And I'm certainly an advocate. My own supervisor lives on the other side of the country and is in a very different job to me. And I find that sort of definitely very helpful. I've always had some external supervision as well as some internal supervision, and that's also very, very helpful. So a mix of the two, if possible. And I would certainly say that as one developed in one's career, it is good to have external supervision periodically or regularly. Should I attend a group based inside or outside the organization? Again, as you start, it may be inside the organization. As you go on, I think it's very, very helpful to have diverse groups. You could have similar professions from outside of the organization. And of course, with online work now, you can do a mix of both. So again, I'd advocate for diversity in all ways. So as you can see, really, there are some themes coming out across one's career. Early career, you're going to look for facilitated supervision. It's probably going to be internal to the organization if you're in somewhere like health. On the other hand, if you're in a particular profession where it's quite unique to you, then you've got no choice but to link up with people from different places. Similar profession. So some of that is also to do with the acquisition and development of skills. For example, in counselling, you would want to acquire and develop and further your skills. So somebody who is more expert than you in that way will be most helpful until you get fully established in your counselling approach. And then you might be able to consciously work with people who've got some different skills to further extend your skills in those ways as well. And as you're learning new therapeutic methods, sometimes supervision comes as part of the package and is a great thing to do. So usually, and depending again on the profession, for example, in counselling, people will have probably a number of supervisors that represent different elements of the work that they're doing. In nursing, you may only have a managerial supervisor and one clinical supervisor. And therefore, the choice of supervisor needs to be sort of quite conscious and considered, the choice of clinical supervisor, because of course you won't have a choice of managerial supervisor. So it makes it all the more important that you have a choice of clinical supervisor. And I would personally advocate for in the nursing professions that they get clinical supervisors outside of nursing, because I think that will really enhance the insight into the work. And then as we go on in professions, we can see that we're going to be looking more at peer supervision, more at external supervision, and more from different professions. So to conclude this short presentation, I would say diversity is health. The more diversity you can have in supervision, the more diverse the groups, the better. The healthier it is, the better outcomes there will be, in my experience and belief, for patients and for the people that we work with. We're going to take a more holistic view. We're taking more things into account. I think that as individuals in our profession, it's also good for us to have a mix of individual and group supervision. And we'll, of course, be self-supervising ourselves all the time. And that sort of inner voice will also tell you, and listen to it, when you need more supervision, or when you need different kinds of supervision to what you're getting, or when you might need a one-off consultation with somebody completely different. So all of those things I would encourage you to use. You cannot get enough support in the caring professions. Thank you.